what is your business for, and is it doing what you wanted it to do whenever you started things? I've got lots and lots of thoughts about this that I have not organized or unpacked, so I will do that with you. This is going to be kind of an all over the place video. So whenever I started North CPA full-time, I was leaving a kind of corporate bank job, 8 to 5, 45-minute commute both ways, Monday through Friday, very structured. And the reason that I left that job is because I wanted to have more flexibility with my time. I wanted to be able to come and go as I pleased. I wanted to be able to spend time with my family. I didn't want to have to ask permission to go to a kid's soccer game. And so that whole first year of being full-time with North CPA, working from home, there were a lot of like, man, imagine if I was still working at the bank moments. Like, imagine if I was still at the bank, I'd just now be getting home. Or imagine if I was at the bank, we wouldn't be able to do this or do that. But here lately, I feel like I've kind of lost that. And I don't know if it's just because the newness of it has worn off or because the business has grown since then. And so there's just more things to do. And I don't feel quite as much freedom of time as I used to. And so part of me worries that maybe back then I really wasn't working as hard as I should be. And if I had been working as hard as I should, then I wouldn't have been enjoying myself as much. And that now this is just normal. Or part of me worries that now I'm just overworking and I need to maybe take a step back and take more time for myself. And then another part of me is worried that I'm probably just overthinking this whole thing and it really doesn't mean all that much. But realistically, like if you scroll on Instagram or on TikTok or whatever for long enough, you're going to find so many messages about how entrepreneurs have to work all the time. And if you're not an entrepreneur, then you don't know what it's like to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and worry about finances. And if you're not, working on your phone while you're at the beach, then you're not really a business owner or whatever. And I get it because I've done all those things. But at the same time, does it have to be that way? Like, does owning a business have to mean that you're working 24 hours a day and not getting paid for most of those hours? On the opposite side of that, there's this concept of a lifestyle business where basically you work just enough to cover the lifestyle you want. You're not really interested in growing any further past what you absolutely need at a bare minimum. And a lot of times that type of business is coupled with really frugal living and sacrificing and not worrying about taking nice vacations and just being happy with what you have. And as with most things, I really think that the best way to be is a combination of the two. Because when people talk about lifestyle businesses, a lot of times it's from the lens of like, yeah, but those aren't really ambitious people. Those aren't people who really want to build something big. Those are people who just kind of want a hobby that funds their lifestyle. And I really don't think that's the case. And also, I don't think it's necessarily the case that if you want to build something big and you want to build something that generates a lot of revenue, that you have to necessarily work 24 hours a day. I really do believe that you can design the life that you want. The number of hours you want to work, the type of work that you want to do, where you want to work, how you want to work. You can design all those things and then work backwards into the business that you build to support that life. And what you might find is it's easier to do that in certain ways than others. So like, for example, if you come up with your life and your lifestyle that you want to live and it's going to cost you $250,000 a year to live that life, and you're selling, let's say, some sort of service at $50 an hour, you can do the quick math to realize how unattainable that's going to be. I just did the math, and you would have to work over 13 hours a day every single day of the year at $50 an hour to get to $250,000 of revenue without any expenses. So it'd have to be even more than that. That's obviously not realistic. So then you have to think, okay, well, maybe I need more people. If I had 10 people underneath me working however many hours a day at $50 an hour, then what would it be? Well, that's maybe more attainable, but now you're managing 10 people. Is that the kind of business you want? And it might not be. But I do think still it starts with just figuring out like, what kind of business do you want, or what kind of life do you want? And then what kind of business do you want to build to reach that goal? So here's kind of what I've been thinking about this. You figure out what life you want. You envision what this looks like, how many hours. And to me, it needs to be specific because there's so much out there with the mindset around fitting work around life and not life around work. And there's so many things about like getting your mindset shift right, which I think is really, really important. But also there needs to be something quantifiable, because at a certain point, like, we got to do the numbers. We have to make sure that this actually makes sense. And as a numbers person, I think it makes sense to say, okay, how much income do you need from your business in order to live the life that you want? Figure out that number and put it aside. And the next thing would be, what kind of work do do you want to be doing? And for me, again, it needs to be quantifiable. So the very first thing I'm going to figure out is how many hours per week are you willing to work and how many weeks per year do you want to work? There's 52 weeks in a year. You probably want a couple of those weeks off for holidays and vacations. You probably want to be able to take a random Friday off. Maybe you don't want to work any Fridays. So let's just say that you figured out that you need to have $75,000 per year of personal income in order to live the life that you want. Now, if we're doing profit first, which I recommend everyone do profit first, then you're going to take that owner's pay, that $75,000, and multiply it by 2 to get $150,000, and that's the size of revenue you need to have from your business in order to sustain $75,000 of owner's pay. So let's say we decide we want to work an average of 30 hours per week. Maybe let's say 20 hours per week. 20 hours per week would be 5 hours a day, Monday through Thursday. So you're not working Friday, Saturdays, or Sundays. So 4 days a week, 5 hours a day is 20 hours a week. And let's say we want to work 48 out of the 52 weeks per year. We want to take an entire month off, maybe all at once, maybe spread out. But that means we're working 960 hours per year. And we want to generate $150,000 of revenue. That comes out to $156 per hour. So then the next question is, do you have some sort of marketable skill that you could charge $150 per hour to do? And do you have the capacity or the demand to be able to fill in all 960 hours with that type of work? Or are you going to need some admin time? So maybe you need to rethink that as well. This works really well for service-based stuff like what I do. But if you're an author and you're writing books, then the math changes a little bit. Instead of looking at it by number of hours, you have to look at it by number of book sales. Or if you're on KU, the number of page reads, and start thinking like, is this a reasonable amount with the number of books that I have out? Or does this mean that I need to have a bigger catalog or maybe more formats of my IP? So if you're just doing print, maybe you need ebook and audiobook, translation, special editions, and those things to get the most out of your IP. But the point is, there's so many different ways to do things. Don't get caught up in, I need to do everything all the time, or I need to do what everyone else is doing. You need to figure out the kind of life you want first, and then the type of business you would like to have, and then figure out how to fit those two together. And we've talked about that before on this channel, and I've been talking about this for a while, but the piece that I think that I haven't been talking about is maybe the most important piece. And that is, once you have that figured out, you kind of know what kind of income you need, and you kind of have an idea of what type of business you want. How do you actually go about living that life with that business? Because I can tell you, for my business, I know the amount of income that I need to make this work. And I know the kind of business that I want to have. I know the way that I want to work. I know how many hours I want to work per week. And to an extent, I'm living that. But am I happy with it right now? And I don't know that I can say that I am 100% satisfied with the way things are going. And so then that kind of brings me back to the very beginning of this video where I was saying how like I don't feel as free now as I did in the beginning, and then wondering if it was just because of the amount of work we have. Here's what I think is missing from my system that could help me really become more satisfied with how I'm working and how I'm getting paid and how the business is being run. And I think it's two things that are missing. Thing one is getting the right information at the right time. So right now, I kind of do everything very reactively whenever it comes to checking numbers in the business. If I'm curious about how much time we're spending doing things, then I'll go and figure out what reports I need to run to get that. If I want to do a cash projection, I'll go figure out the reports and the numbers that I need to do that. But I was doing a lot of thinking the other day of like, if I just wanted the least amount of information possible to make the best decisions for the business, what would that look like and how often would I have to look at that? And I was kind of talking about this in another video earlier about like, what should you be looking at in your business? And what I realized is I don't need to know when things are going well. I only need to know whenever there's an exception, right? So like, I don't need to know that this many clients' bookkeeping things got closed this month. If that's what was supposed to happen, if it all happened on time, then great. Like I don't need to know that. But what I do need to know is if there's a client that we're stuck on because we haven't received bank statements, or maybe we have questions that haven't been answered, or maybe there's some sort of internal thing that needs to be taken care of. I need to know that. I need to know if there's a client who asked a question that hasn't been answered in our 3-day turnaround that we try and uphold. I need to figure out what's going on with that. Did the question just get missed? Did somebody think somebody else was answering? What was going on? So operationally, I've come up with like, I need to look at any project that we're showing as overdue. I need to look at projects that are coming due just so I have an idea of what to expect. And I need to know any client communication that is older than 3 days old, which there should be 0 of those, but every now and then it happens. So then what that makes me realize is do I have that data readily available? I can easily look to see client communications that are more than 3 days old because we've put a lot of effort into making sure that we have visibility into that. But we have not been consistent about having due dates on every single project in our task list, or updating those due dates if something changes. Like if we're waiting on information from the client, and so the due date's impossible, then we get the information from the client. We're not always consistent about updating those due dates, and so they just persistently show as overdue. So whenever we think about like, well, why is that? Why don't we change the due date? It's because, well, we kind of like the idea of it being overdue because it makes us realize that like it's urgent, it needs to be taken care of. Well, maybe we need a better system for that. So you can see where like when you start thinking about what information you would need to run the business the way you want, you start noticing the systems that need to be in place to get that information. So one thing we're trying to do now with our clients is figure out, okay, yes, we can do the bookkeeping. Yes, we can help you manage your profit first system. Yes, we can do your tax return. But with all that data that we have access to, could we give you information that you would need in order to run your business? Like very high level things, like what was your revenue last month? What was your profit last month? How much cash do you have on hand? How much did you pay yourself as the owner? How much was that as a percentage of revenue? And just giving you that snapshot at the very minimum to be able to see that and say, okay, cool, things are good, and then move on. So maybe that's it. Maybe like that one thing that I feel is missing for me is the confidence in knowing that I can get the information I need to make decisions about the business on a regular basis, just like conveniently and automatically. The other part that I think is missing, and this is really a big mindset thing, and maybe it's just a me thing, is the expectations. And I've talked about this in another video before, but the idea of feeling like I'm always in trouble. You know, if I'm spending time with the family, then I'm worried about how many emails I have that haven't been answered yet, even if those emails just came in that day. And it would be very reasonable for me to answer those within 24 hours. I'm still worried and thinking about it. Or if I'm catching up on emails, I might be worried that I'm not reviewing this tax return over here. Or if I'm reviewing this tax return, maybe I'm worried that I'm not spending enough time with the family. And so it's this constant feeling that I'm letting someone down, or like someone's expecting something from me, or somebody's waiting on something from me. I think the big fix with that is expectations, and making sure that expectations are set and they're clear and they're communicated. So for example, something we've been trying to do lately is make sure that like if I get an email from a client, I'm going to respond to that within a couple of days. But whenever you email somebody, you want to know that the person received your email. And if you haven't heard back within a day, you're starting to wonder, like, did you email the right person? Did it go to the right place? Did it end up in spam? So now I have my admin going in and answering emails if I haven't answered them right away to say, hey, just letting you know we got this. Seth is working on it. He'll be in touch shortly. We're even playing with the idea of creating like a shared inbox. So instead of seth@northcpafirm.com, that is my email address if you would like to email me questions. But instead of that, maybe it would be accounting at our team or whatever. And we would all have access to that inbox, and you would just get a response back from whoever is either first available to answer that question or the most capable of answering the question. That way, a lot of times where I'll get a question from someone, and honestly, like Ben is the right person to answer that. So then I have to respond back and CC Ben and say, hey, Ben's going to help you with this. And then he sees the email, then he gets back. And it's frustrating for you as the client to like be bounced around like that. But I also don't want to just have a persistent auto reminder that says like, thanks for the email, we'll be back and we'll get in touch later. Because then those start to not mean anything. But anyway, point is just setting that expectation about like knowing, okay, this is what to expect when you email us. This is what to expect whenever you submit your tax documents. This year, we implemented something that I really liked where we said, we got your tax documents, but based on our capacity and based on our scheduling, we're set to start your tax return on this date. And so you won't hear anything from us about your tax return until that date. But if you have questions in the meantime, let us know. I felt like that was really good for a lot of reasons because one, it let people know what to expect. Like instead of thinking that the tax return is going to get done in 2 days, it might be 2 weeks. It also let you know that we got your information and it would be worked on. And it let you know that we wouldn't start working on it until a certain date. It allowed us to plan our capacity. It allowed us to plan our workloads. It allowed us to set expectations. So that was really good. And that was an example of something that I really want to put into place kind of all over. So yeah, that's been what's on my mind this week. I've been thinking about how in the beginning of this business, I had a lot of freedom of time, but then the money side of things were tight. And now that the business has grown, I have less time. And so figuring out a way to make that perfect balance and figure out a way if there is a perfect balance there. In other news, I don't know if you are an AI person, if you're like anti ChatGPT or whatever, but I did log into ChatGPT today as I'm recording this video, and something popped up that I didn't expect to see this quick. It was I forgot what they called it, something finance. It uses Plaid. So if you've ever like connected your online banking with your bank account to QuickBooks, usually that gets connected through Plaid. If you go and you pay for something online, like through ShopPay, I want to say maybe it uses Plaid to connect those bank accounts. Plaid is like the standard in connecting your online banking platforms to other services. Well, apparently that's now built into ChatGPT. And so you can connect your bank stuff, like your bank account balances, your transactions and everything, to ChatGPT and build dashboards and reports and ask questions. And it's really interesting what's happening there. We've kind of moved away from ChatGPT for most things and moved into Claude whenever we're trying to create efficiencies internally. But I can see a future in the not so distant future where you have your bank accounts, like your business bank accounts, connected to some sort of AI, and then it just builds you a P&L. Like, why couldn't Claude or ChatGPT take the transactions from your online banking, put them in a spreadsheet, categorize them, look up vendors that it's unsure of, ask you questions about transactions it doesn't know, and then build you a P&L and build you financial statements and analyses? I feel like we're kind of there. I feel like it's already possible to do this, especially now with this Plaid integration. I would not be surprised if we saw Claude come out with their Plaid integration probably in the next week. And a lot of people might say like, well, gosh, Seth, aren't you afraid of what this would do to bookkeeping if the AI can just do the bookkeeping? Absolutely not, because we do not want to be in the business of categorizing transactions and clicking match, match, match in QuickBooks over and over. I would much rather be in the business of saying like, hey, looks like your revenue really dropped this month. What's going on? And asking those questions and giving you that data from the numbers that you can use to run the business the way that you want to run it, kind of tying this whole thing together. So all kinds of questions today. First, does your business look today the way you thought it would whenever you started it? And if it doesn't, what's changed? Why is that? Are you on the way there, or do you still have work to do? Second, are there numbers or is there information that you would want to have on a regular basis, whether daily, weekly, or monthly, that could help you build that business that you want to build? Like if there was 1 or 2 or 3 things that you could see on a regular basis that would make you say, okay, I'm good with this now, then like what would that look like? And 3, how do you feel about AI bookkeeping or AI being connected to your bank account? Does that make you nervous and squeamish? Do you think it's cool, but you still like to have another set of human eyes on it? Or would you rather just get the humans out of your finances altogether and just let the computers take care of it? Thank you for putting up with my ramblings, and I will see you next time.